Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari, and 2 years ago this month was the very first haul I ever posted on this channel. So I thought it would be fun to every month from now on, because this was like the first haul and then I started doing them basically every month, but every month to go back and to watch the haul from 2 years ago that month, see what I've read and what I haven't read, and then spend maybe a week or a couple of days trying to read as many books as I haven't read from those hauls, right? So make room on my bookshelf, get rid of these older books, and kind of like review, like, what was I buying 2 years ago and why? So I'm gonna go ahead and insert like the video over here somewhere, right? And then we'll go through together, watch the video. I'll probably like fast forward and stuff because I know I'm long-winded sometimes. And then we'll just kind of see, like, what did I buy? Have I read it? Do I still need to read it? And then at the end we'll come up with a TBR together, and then it depends. Like, if I have like 1 or 2, 3 books, I could definitely read them. If I have like 20 unread books, then that's not getting read, and I'll just pick a couple of them. So let's jump right into this. Hello, and welcome to whatever day of the week it is today. I'm lost. Oh my gosh, it's so heavy. I had boxes come in the mail today. It's also raining outside, if you can tell by the side of this box. But yeah, okay, the first thing I want to bring up is I'm holding up a book outlet box here. This video was recorded before Book Outlet came out as racist. So this was obviously recorded in April, but in June that year was when it had come out that they were denying reps because of their looks being inappropriate for branding or whatever, and all of the people that didn't look like good representation were all black people, or darker skinned black people. So there may be 1 or 2 videos where I'm buying things from Book Outlet, but I have not since like 2 year ago in June. I think maybe this month and next month would have been Book Outlets, but I no longer shop from them, but I did not realize they were problematic at the point in time that I recorded this video. First one is from Uncommon Tea, or August Uncommon Tea, I guess is the name on the back here, but it's tea. So I ordered tea. We're gonna skip over this. The next order is from Amazon Prime. This is a book that I pre-ordered that came in. And this is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix is the first book that I have here. I did read this. I think this was the first Grady Hendrix book that I ever read. This is not my favorite book by him, but I really did like this book, and now Grady Hendrix is one of my favorite writers, and I've read a ton of books by him. Then my real problem is I ordered a lot from Book Outlet when they were doing 30% off. First is a paperback of a book called Beckoning of the Fallen Gods by R.A. Salvatore. I have read Beckoning of Fallen Gods. I actually read that recently because R.A. Salvatore was like the only author that fit a prompt from my TBR game. Then the next book I got is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the very first book in the Murderbot series, and they're novellas, so it's very short. Alright, I also have read All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is the first book in the Murderbot Diaries. I am completely caught up on the Murderbot Diaries series because Murderbot is everything. This is called The Test All right, the next book was The Test by Sylvain Nouvelle. I have read this as well. I read it a long time ago, and it was a very interesting short story. I have since read other books by Sylvain Nouvelle, and I like his Take Them to the Stars series much better than I like The Test, but The Test was a very interesting concept. Next up, I've got The Night Tiger. So next book was The Night Tiger by Yangsi Cho, or Chu. I don't know. It's covered up with a sticker, and I can't remember exactly her last name. I think it's Chu. But I did read this. This is like kind of magical realism vibes, where you don't know if magic is actually happening or if it's just kind of like something natural that's being explained away in the mind of the narrator. This one, it was okay, but not really my vibe of fantasy. So I don't know. Like, I do not recommend this to anybody. I just didn't personally love it, but I did read it quite a while ago. The next is a group of books. So these are from the Program series by Susan Young. Okay, so that is the last 3 out of 6 books in the Program series. That was awful. I did a reading vlog, like a 24-hour reading vlog where I read the entire Program series in a 24-hour period, and oh my god, it burned me out on reading Suzanne Young for so long because oh, it was so bad. Apologies about the dog noises in the background. He's doing dog things, but yes, read those. Don't recommend. Like, just avoid that series. Next up is another series that a billion people have been telling me to read because I like fantasy. I know one of my girlfriends recently read this series, and it's Spinning Silver by Naomi Novak. Alright, we've hit the first book that I haven't read, which is Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. We have it right here, Spinning Silver. I'm going to read this month. I was already planning on reading it because I knew this was one of the older books on my TBR, and the book covered book club prompt this month is a book with a blue cover, and this is a very, very blue cover. So I was already planning to read this for that, but I don't know why I haven't read this. This was the first book by Naomi Novik I ever own, and I've actually read other books by Naomi Novik and still haven't got around to this one, and I still think I'm gonna like it. So maybe this is one that I'm so sure I'm going to like I'm afraid to read it in case I don't like it. Who knows, but this will be read this month. Next up, I have a book called The Wood, which I don't remember ordering. So next up is a book called The Wood. I did, like, I say in this video that I don't remember ordering it, but it was on my TBR already. I think Kayla from Books and Lala recommended it, and that's why I put it on my TBR and then forgot about it. This is horror, but it wasn't particularly horrific. It read more like YA fantasy. It was fairly unmemorable, so unless the premise like really stands out is something that you want to read, I don't know that I would recommend it. But I did read this a while ago, and it was like a 3-star. So not bad, not great, meh. The next 2 books are by the same author. They're by Jon Ronson, and they are The Psychopath Test and So You've Been Publicly Shamed. Okay, so You've Been Publicly Shamed and The Psychopath Test by Jon Ronson. I have read So You've Been Publicly Shamed. I think I pulled it out of my Jar of Doom last year. I read it and I didn't like it. Like, I didn't like it at all. So because of that, I kind of put off reading The Psychopath Test, just because there was like a lot of problematic stuff in So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and Jon Ronson as a white American man was like forgiving people for like their racist and inappropriate comments when he has no right to forgive people for things that they say. Like when the things that they're saying doesn't affect him or doesn't associate with them. So if people are saying like racist things, John Ronson as a white man can't be like, well, it's okay, I forgive her for the racist things she said. And it's like, you have no right. What? So that kind of put me off ever trying to pick this up, but I will read it this month, or at least attempt to read it. If it's as problematic as that one, I'll probably end up DNFing this, but it seems to be a completely different premise, so maybe I won't dislike it so much, but I don't think after I read this that I will ever pick up anything by John Ronson again. Next up, I've got another thriller. I love the Sookie Stackhouse series, so I ended up getting another series by Charlene Harris, who writes the Sookie Stackhouse, or True Blood if you've only seen the television show. Alright, so this is An Easy Death by Charlene Harris. I did read this last year, fairly recently. This may have been another Jar of Doom pick, but it's like a futuristic western and I loved it. Like, I am super looking forward to finishing this series, but y'all know how many backlist series stuff I have. So it may not be anytime soon, but I am definitely looking forward to reading more from this series. Next is a book called, oh, it's wet. Stupid rain. Next is a book called Fate of the Fallen by Kellcade. Alright, so next up is Fate of the Fallen by Kellcade. This was a very cool book, and the sequel, like the second book in this series, came out just last month. So I have read this. I liked it. I pre-ordered the sequel to it, and I'm planning to read that next month because I don't have time this month, but very good series. Very, like, interesting premise. The premise of this is there's a chosen one who's destined to save the world, but he like dies in the first chapter. And so like what happens to the world when the person prophesies to be the only person who can save the world dies before they can save the world, before they even really know they're supposed to save the world. So very much enjoyed that. Looking forward to the sequel. Highly recommend if you like chosen one fantasy tropes, because it's such a subversion of that. And then my last book in this box got super freaking damaged. Thank you. This is Robert Jordan, the Warrior of Altai. I probably pronounced it wrong. So, last book in there was The Warrior of Altai by Robert Jordan. Obviously unread since it's in my hand right now. So this one, it's just one of those things that I don't know if I'm going to like it, but I bought it because it's by Robert Jordan. So this was Robert Jordan's first book that he ever wrote. And if you don't know who Robert Jordan is, he wrote the Wheel of Time series. So this was written in like the 1970s, but it wasn't ever published until like 2019, 2018, somewhere in there. So like a fantasy written in the 1970s doesn't typically appeal to me as a modern female reader, because usually there's a lot of problematic content in these things, but Robert Jordan does write women really well, so maybe, but we'll read it this month and find out, won't we? That seems to be everything that I had in that video. So it looks like I have read 12 of the books that I hauled in that video and didn't read 3. I'm pretty sure I can get all 3 of those in this month and read all 3 of them. So let's move now into the vlog portion of this video where I read those books and then I talk to you about them. Alright, so the first hauled book I've read is Warrior of the Altai by Robert Jordan. Now, the background on this is very interesting because, assuming you don't know, Robert Jordan wrote the Wheel of Time series, and before the Wheel of Time series he wrote like companion novels for the Conan the Barbarian movies, which I've read all of the Wheel of Time. I've read the Conan novels and everything like that. But this book wasn't published until 2019, and he had been dead for like 7 to 10 years by that point. So it's like, wait, what is this? Basically, when Robert Jordan was very young, in the 1970s, Warrior of the Altai was the first full-length complete novel that he had ever written. So he writes this novel, he sends it out to some editors, an editor buys it and then sets on it and then returns the rights to him, and then another editor buys it and sets on it and then returns the rights to him, and he just keeps selling this novel, but no one actually publishes it. And then by that time he has met Harriet, who was his wife, but first she was his editor, and she had convinced him, based off of reading this book, to write the Conan novels, and so that ended up being the first novels that he had published. And then from there he got into Wheel of Time, and so this just never got published. And because his editor was his wife, after he passed away, she still had access to this book and was able to publish it. This is fairly short, but it is a barbarian type story where we have a barbarian named Wolfgar who, like, he and some other people are like prophesized to save his people if he stays alive. And some bad guys know that if he dies, he and these 2 other people die, then the Altai will fall. But if the Altai don't fall, they have to change from like roaming hunter-gatherers to like settle down farmers. So, and that's basically what this follows, is like this war between peoples from Wolfgar's perspective. The fact that this was written in the 1970s made me a little concerned going into it, because there are problematic content in these type of books in the 1970s, mainly sexual assault, extreme lack of consent, and this does include a scene of that. So I want you to like be aware going into this. There is the non-consent sexual assault of a man in here, of Wolfgar particularly. It is fade to black. There are other scenes where it's implied that women may be or may have been sexually assaulted, but it's not explicit, not even like fade to black explicit. And then there's also slavery in this story, so obviously non-consent issues there. For the most part, it's not too bad though, as far as like problematic content like that. And Robert Jordan actually writes women very well. If you've read Wheel of Time, you'll know that, but this is another example of it. Is he's weirdly enough, Robert Jordan treats women like human beings and not like mystical creatures that men can't write. There's also another very interesting section of this book, considering it was the 70s, where there is a third non-binary gender. Which, I mean, we see all the time now, but something from the 70s, you don't really ever see that. So I thought that was kind of cool. Is this the best book I've ever read? No. Is this the worst book I've ever read? No. It's pretty decent, pretty average. It's definitely a 3-star, but probably like a higher 3-star. I enjoyed my time reading this. I read it in like one setting, and overall it's pretty good. If you like military barbarian fantasy, you're gonna like this book. There's a lot of battles. Robert Jordan is known for his battles, and he does not disappoint in this one. So if it sounds interesting to you, I would definitely recommend you pick it up, but you're not going to like miss out on anything special if you don't want to read it. Alright, let's talk about the Psychopath Test, but before we get into it, I just want to say that if the camera moves or you hear any weird noises, the dog is literally like right here. Do you want to make an appearance? This is my stinky boy. He's being very needy and has to be next to me. So he's recording with us, so if you hear weird noises or the camera moves, it's just him. Before I get really into a review on the book, let's talk about Jon Ronson himself. I've read another book by him and I didn't like it, but I had bought that book and this book at the same time, so that's one of the reasons I had put this off for so long, is because I didn't think I was going to like it. And yes, I was correct about not liking it. But I also want to note that Jon Ronson is an investigative reporter. He's not a psychologist, he's not a psychiatrist. He is an investigative reporter. So that's already troubling, going into something about psychology, psychiatry, when he has no background to say on it. So I like knew going in here to take everything with a grain of salt, but then he just made it so much worse. Jon Ronson is a good writer. Like, I will give him that. Like, this is very easy to read, but the information, he tries to present it as like a neutral, like I'm talking to both sides. But I think I saw a saying once, is like, if one of your sides is like a Nazi or somebody extremely problematic, like, you're not taking both sides. There's not two sides to that subject in that case. That is hate and bigotry, and then just normal people. And one of the references he uses, like an anti-psychiatry reference that he is constantly meeting with and constantly quoting in this book, is the Church of Scientology. And it's just like, come on, you can't use the Church of Scientology as like a legitimate reference. What are you doing? So that in and of itself is scummy. The way he treats mental health in general is pretty scummy. A lot of these like mental health cases or psychopath cases that he's citing, and like the studies and the anti-psychiatry psychology studies that he is citing, happened in the 1960s. And we're all aware that the 1960s was a really, really awful time for medicine, and especially psychiatry. Like electroshock therapy, putting a bunch of people on LSD, like, we know that that is bad, and none of that happens anymore. So why are you talking about modern psychology, giving these references, and then referring cases from the 1960s with things that don't happen anymore? Like, that is purposely painting psychology and psychiatry in a bad light, with like misleading information. Because I know that, you know that, but a lot of people might not know that that shit doesn't happen anymore. One of the references he uses that is like actually like a psychological reference is, there's like this book apparently that has all of the mental diseases, which is in and of itself problematic. I'm not even sure they actually use it anymore because all of his references are so outdated. And like, I don't think he uses anything later than the 90s as a psychological study in this book. And this was published in 2011. So it's an older publication, plus he didn't cite any psychological studies after the 1990s. Most of them were from the 60s. So you can see why that's like a misleading problem. Then he goes to a conference and he learns himself how to administer this psychopath test made by some doctor. And like, the idea of the test is there's a bunch of questions, and if somebody scores like a 30 out of 40 or above, then they're probably a psychopath. And so Jon Ronson, who is not a trained psychologist or a psychiatrist, is going out and just giving this test to people. He'd just be like, oh, he's probably a psychopath. Not really. He'd basically be like, he'd have a conversation or interview somebody, and then every time they said something, he would cite the questions that their answer fit into on the psychopath test. Now, while the psychopath test might be something legitimate that psychiatrists really do, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I had problems with that too, because one of like the signs of a psychopath is sexual promiscuity. And it's like, let's not slut shame. Come on. Why? So this is obviously something that's outdated and probably based on Freudian standards and stuff like that. And then making it even more problematic. And then outside of psychopaths, he mentions other mental illnesses, and let me tell you, a lot of these are outdated, and unfortunately I have to report that this book does label being trans as a mental illness, which it is not. What the fuck, Jon Ronson? Like, that wasn't necessary. You're talking about psychopaths. Why the fuck do you need to bring in transness to this? And the person that he was talking about was not even trans. They were a cross-dresser. There is a difference. I don't know if you've ever seen drag, but most drag queens are not trans individuals. But this person was cross-dressing, never identified themselves as a woman as far as we know. Maybe they were trans. I can't speak to it. But from the information we were given, does not a trans person make. And this person never stated that they were trans. They just liked wearing dresses. And again, Jon Ronson is like, oh, this is a mental illness. And like, the mental illness uses the inappropriate word for trans, not our modern word that I am using. Why does it keep focusing on this dude's little face? Look at me, camera, not at my buddy over here. But yeah, like, there's just so many different little inappropriate and like misleading things in this book that it skeeves me out that you're supposed to believe this is like non-biased and he's just reporting on all of the different things he learns. Just the way that he presents this non-biased report has obviously problematic and obviously misleading information. Like, you can be non-biased and write this book, but you're going out of your way to mislead people. You could be non-biased, you can write this book, you could talk about psychopaths and a psychopath test, but like going out of your way to be misleading about some of the information is sketchy. Is that a good bone? Yeah, it is. So I don't want to recommend this to people because it's sketchy. It's inaccurate and misleading. I also want to note that the people that he did interview to like tell if they were psychopaths and stuff like that, like, a lot of these people are murderers, like by far and beyond the people who he is calling psychopaths and interviewing to see if they're psychopaths are murderers. So, but like, did you really need to do the test on those people? One person is in an insane asylum and he says he shouldn't be there, and Jon Ronson's like, well, he seems pretty normal. And it's like, you're not his doctor. Fuck off with this shit. And then the CEO, because he's like, one of the things in here, or one of the points that he makes in here is that many people in leadership positions or CEOs are psychopaths. And Yeah, the one CEO that he interviewed for like that, or talked about like directly speaking about a specific person, is a guy who got hired as a CEO of the company to literally fire half of the employees and just shut down like a shit ton of factories, and then he got fired. Why is that your example of a CEO? But yeah, all around, I'm gonna say it's kind of like somewhere in between like a 1 and 2 star. 1 star for the content, but I kind of want to give it like a half of a star or a whole star because it's really well written. John Ronson is a good writer. It's just his information is shitty. So it's not like hard to read or boring or anything like that. Like I sat there and read this through really quick, no problem. But I definitely don't recommend it to anybody. So we'll probably mark it down as a 1 star on Goodreads. And yeah, let's get to Spinning Silver, which is the last book for this video, and I'm hoping that's a whole lot better. Alright, the Grump, the puppy, is sleeping, so let's see if I can talk about this book without him making awful noises in the background. So I did finish Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This is basically a Rumpelstiltskin retelling where we have a young girl who is the daughter of a Jewish moneylender, and her name is Miriam, and her father is really, really bad at being a moneylender. He will loan out people money, but he doesn't like collect on people. Her mother becomes sick and she's like, we need this money. Like, I am sick of being poor. Mom's gonna die if we don't feed her. And we need to get her medicine. So she takes it upon herself to go collect this money and demand repayment in interest from all these people who've been taking advantage of her father for her entire life. And she's really good at it. And basically she's so good at it that she brags to her mother that she can turn silver into gold. Now, the Ice Fairy King, I guess is what we're gonna call it. I think their name's Stark. S-T-A-R-Y-K. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm guessing it's Stark. But overhears her saying that she can turn silver into gold. He basically sets her the task of having to turn silver into gold 3 different times in like basically impossible circumstances, but it's not like she's not magically doing it. She just is good at bargaining and selling things, right? He sets her with this task and then she has to perform it, and like a bunch of other shit goes down from there. Like the whole task is done pretty early in the book, right? But we also follow some other characters. We follow Wanda, who is a very, very poor girl. Her father's an abusive alcoholic, and she ends up working for Miriam's family in order to pay off her father's debt, because her father doesn't owe or doesn't earn any money to pay off his own debt. So she does like chores around the house and then kind of becomes involved with the family more. And then we also follow the daughter of a rich nobleman named Irina, I think is her name. And her father kind of wants her to marry a man that is demonic. And her story gets kind of woven into Miriam's and Wanda's stories all together. So it's a very interesting concept. I think if it was just kept to those 3 characters, I would have liked it more, but there are a bunch of other perspective characters. The Grump woke up and he is grumping. There are other perspective characters and it just becomes too much. Like, I don't like a whole lot of perspective characters in my stories. But outside of like those extra perspectives that I didn't care for, like, the whimsical fairy tale-ness of this is really fun. It's kind of set in like a Russian winter setting, so I don't think this was like the greatest thing to read in the spring. I would save it for winter because it's a winter setting. But if you don't care to line up your books with seasons, then read it whenever you want. I don't like this as much as I like the Scholomance series. I definitely like the Scholomance a lot more than this, but I did enjoy my time with this. I'm going to end up giving it 4 stars, and yeah, it's just whimsical, like, retelling of a somewhat well-known fairy tale, with really strong, powerful women who get shit done. So all in all, pretty good. Highly recommend. Oh, that's all. That's all of the books for this month's Read Your TBR. 3 books was not too bad. I'm worried about a couple of months. I think June's gonna be a scary month because I think I bought a lot of books. I think I bought a lot of like nonfiction and some like books by Black authors that I really haven't read at all, that I need to. I keep trying to save them for like special occasions and then never getting around to reading them on those special occasions. So that's gonna be an interesting month. But I don't know what's coming up next month. I will definitely have a video next month. I'm pretty sure for the rest of this year at least I will have these videos, so I hope you do like me reviewing these hauls and reading them. Let me know down in the comments below what the oldest book on your TBR is that you haven't read yet, and if you don't have one, don't want to talk about it, then leave me a blue emoji, because I got a blue shirt on, we got a blue book cover, so anything blue that you have, leave me that emoji down in the comments below, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!